Hi, folks. This is Mr. Thomas, your friendly neighborhood DMPT 2600 basic editing instructor again. I'm here to continue the lesson that we learned in our last video, which was giving you a basic tour of the Adobe Premiere Pro interface. And we also covered the project panel, some things about the project panel. I told you that the project panel is the panel that receives media when you import it to use in a project, import it to use in your timeline. Sometimes we'll call a sequence a timeline. Of course, we have the timeline window there, so we kind of know what that means. But also, I wanted to talk today. I mentioned the source panel, but I want to talk today a little bit more about the source panel. So if you follow the workflow, you import media, it appears in your project panel, then you organize it in your project panel. As we saw earlier, we talked about how the different elements, the different icons. We only saw two, and the project panel should be organized in bins. Well, after you do that, the next step you want to start thinking about is determining which portion of your clips that you have imported into the project panel, which portion of those clips are you going to actually use in your edit or in your project or in your film or in your video. All words meaning the same thing, or in your sequence. Okay, so that's where the source panel comes in. The source panel allows you to make selects from your source clips. So that basically means that in this case, if you look at the clip that's in the timeline, look at this clip that's in the source monitor, right here, you see that I have a clip of these rocks here, just giving you a little tour of the source monitor. The blue numbers on the left-hand side, that's time code for the master time code. What did the camera say when I shot this frame of footage right here? Okay, if I play a little bit of it by hitting the space bar, what did the camera's time code say when I shot this frame of footage? That's frozen. I'm gonna make this full screen by hitting the tilde key. Okay, so this is your master time code. That's what did the camera's time code say when I shot this footage, this particular frame I'm frozen on. On the right-hand side, that is my duration field in the source panel. That tells me how much of the source clip has been selected for use in the source panel. Okay, now if you haven't selected anything yet, like as in this case right here, it will basically just tell you the entire time of the source clip, how long it is, how long its duration. Its duration is also called its media start to media end duration. Media start is when we hit the record button on the camera and started recording. Media end is when we hit the record button again and the camera stopped recording or it cut. If you use all of that, as we have here in the source panel, all of that shot or all of that clip, okay, that means the same thing. Shot and clip means the same thing. But if it's the entire shot that we shot with the camera, then we have the clip from media start to media end. But we don't have to do that. This clip that's loaded, we don't have a media start to media end, so it tells me how long the whole clip is, which is 11 seconds and 20 frames. I can set an in point and an out point in this mini timeline in the bottom of the source monitor. Okay, I can set an in point and an out point to use a specific portion of it. Let's choose a different shot because not a whole lot is changing that shot, and it's really hard to tell if that's not a still image. So let's choose something where there's a little more going on. And all of these are nature, so there's not a whole lot of movement. Hey, there's a lady standing on a rock here. Okay, so we watch the whole clip. Every time you start to edit, you always want to watch the whole clip of everything. You never want to just start editing without being familiar with your footage. So one of the first things you do once you import your footage into Premiere Pro, you double click each source clip in the project panel load it into the source monitor. That's one of several ways you can load a clip into the source monitor. And then you watch it over and over and over. Why are you watching it over and over and over again? Because you want to become familiar with the clip. You want to know what's in the clip. And as you watch it over and over again, you'll find out, well, okay, the first 3 seconds are bad, but the middle 5 seconds are good, and the last 2 seconds are kind of okay. You're starting to play that chess game in your head of how can I use this clip in the video that I am about to make. So that's one great reason for watching footage over and over and over again. If I have to say one mistake that a lot of new or young filmmakers make, especially in this time of in this age of digital media, where it's very easy to shoot and edit footage, lots of footage. One of the biggest problems people have, one of the biggest errors they make, is that they don't watch their footage. We used to call this logging your footage back in the old days, because as you are watching your footage, you should be taking notes on the footage, things that you notice that you want to make a note of, so you can later on bear that in mind when you choose to edit it into your timeline. You should still do logging now. We just do it a little differently. We don't necessarily do it with pencil and paper. You still can, but the idea is we use digital means to do that. We'll talk about that a little later when we talk about using markers. But in any case, we have our timeline, our master time code on the left in blue, time code numbers, our duration, okay, on the right. Let's say if this is a 14 second and 22 frame clip, let's say you only want to use a portion of the clip where the lady has the camera up at her face. So let's say we want to start from the beginning, and I'm just dragging this is called a playhead, this little blue item called the playhead. I'm gonna drag the playhead to the beginning or to the media start, okay? And I'm going to set an endpoint, endpoint, okay? This is what the source monitor will allow you to do. I'm gonna make what's called a select. That means I'm gonna select a small portion of this 14 second, 22 frame clip by setting an endpoint and an out point, okay? So I'll just show you one way to do it. You can click the mark in button right here at the bottom of the source monitor. Just like a little left facing bracket, okay? Click on that, and you can see at the timeline at the very corner, it's hard to see this little bracket on the far left side at media start, okay? And then I'm gonna go to media end. Typically you'd watch it through real time. You wouldn't skim through like I am, but I'm trying to demonstrate this in a reasonable amount of time. And I wanna stop taking footage just before the camera comes down. I'm gonna set an out point right there. So I've got an in point and an out point. If you remember, my original duration was 14 seconds and 22 frames. It's now 13 seconds and 14 frames, because this duration field now reflects the amount of footage between my in point at media start and my out point that I've set right here. Okay, it's 13 seconds and 14 frames. So that's how much footage I have selected. So this is one of the uses that you have for the source monitor. Also, the source monitor can be used to actually accomplish the next step, which is to actually edit the clip to the timeline. And just to show you a demonstration of that very quickly, I'm going to go to the very last clip in my timeline. Okay. And then there are two main types of edits, two main types of means of getting your clip from the source panel down into the timeline. One is an overwrite edit and the other is an insert edit. Overwrite edit is more common, and normally when you're starting from scratch and you have nothing in your timeline, you normally start with an overwrite edit. Now, I know that many of you who may have had experience with any editing program may be used to dragging and dropping clips to the timeline like this, okay? And yes, it will get the clip to the timeline, but it is very imprecise and unprofessional, okay? It's because I'm basically depending upon my eye to drop it in the right place. Now, this is pretty easy because I'm just dropping it on the end of the last clip, but when you're editing professional work or more involved work, it'll be a lot more complicated. You have to be a lot more precise as far as where you want that edit to fall, as we say, or where you want that shot to drop into the timeline. And just doing it by eye is not precise at all. Okay, and when you start talking about editing really professional projects, you'll see that the level of precision has to be a lot higher. So we're going to introduce a little later on the concept of 3-point editing, where you set an in point and an out point in your source monitor, and then you set an in point in your timeline, wherever you want the clip to land in your timeline, and then you set your source track indicators and your track headers so that it falls into the correct track. You see we have these like V1 track, we have V1 track, V2 track, V3 track. They stack up like pancakes. And we have A1 track, A2 track, A3 track. They stack up as well like pancakes, except for going downwards. And you can drop clips into different tracks, different video tracks and audio tracks. Okay, we'll talk about that later. But the idea is, once you've set all of that up, you've set your in point, your out point, your in point, your timeline, your in point and out point, your source monitor, in point, your timeline, you're set up for your 3-point edit. You set your source track indicators and your track headers to tell Premiere which tracks you want this clip to fall into. Now you would either do an override edit or you would do an insert edit. We're going to do an override edit by clicking the override button, just like that, and it pops into the timeline. 3-point edit accomplished. That is something else you can do with the source monitor, something else you need to know about it. Also, from the source monitor, you have a settings menu. You can access it by clicking the wrench icon here. Click on that. Sometimes they call a wrench a spanner. I think it's more of a UK or English thing. Click the wrench or spanner, and you'll see I have different things, different commands or different options that I can exercise that affects how I see the footage in the source panel. Okay, so for example, if I just want to see the audio that's associated with this clip, I don't want to see the video, I just want to see the audio waveform to see what it looks like, I can click the spanner and then choose audio waveform, and it's going to show me the waveform. The video is still associated with it, but I'm not looking at it right now. I'm just looking at the audio. Okay, maybe there's a specific audio cue I'm looking for or some sound, and it may be more helpful for me to look at the waveform. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the source panel settings menu. That's what I call this menu, its full name, source panel settings menu. If I want to see the video and hear the audio at the same time, I'm going to go back to composite video. Composite just basically means put it all together. Put the video with the audio together and show it to me again. So we have the settings panel right there, the source monitor settings panel, something I can have access from the source monitor. By the way, I have my playback and pause controls at the bottom of the source monitor, in addition to my mark in and mark out controls. We'll talk about setting markers a little later on. I can, well, as far as playback, this is the play button here. That'll play. I can step back 1 frame at a time. If I hit the play button and then hit it again, it'll stop it or pause it, really stop it. If I press this step forward 1 frame button, each time I tap it, it goes 1 frame into the future, or 1 frame positively down the timeline for this source clip in the source monitor on its little mini timeline. I can press the go to out button, which will make jump my playhead to the out point. I can press the go to in button, which will jump my playhead to the in point. Okay, and I've already talked about the overwrite button and the insert button. This button right here, export frame. For example, if you want to save this clip, if you want to save this frame, this image as a still image, maybe you want to put it on your website as a thumbnail or something like that to show you what this clip is all about. You could take a picture of it or export the individual frame, and you can export it into a bunch of different formats. DPX is one of the most popular. It's a higher quality one, but you could also use JPEG, OpenEXR, PNG, Target, or TIFF. Each of them have their advantages and disadvantages, and then you can export it to your hard drive or to the desktop or something like that. Another feature I want to bring your attention to is the recent clips menu. Essentially, if you look at the top of the source panel and you click the source panel menu, remember the 3 horizontal lines you see on a tab or on a panel. We call that a menu. That's a type of menu, and this is the one that's associated with the source panel. So these three horizontal lines are the source panel menu. I click on that, and I have some options here, like I can choose to close the panel, undock the panel, close other panels in a group, and so forth. But it's these last two sections here I want to focus on right now. This is a list of all of the most recent clips that I have loaded into the source panel. So if I want to quickly load up this 00020 source clip, I can tap on that and it'll bring that up really quickly. It's like a list of recent clips, okay? And this list can be much longer than 4 clips. It can be many, many clips. The idea being that many times when we're editing, especially if we're editing reverses are basically if I am editing a shot of, say, let's go back to this guy. Say if I have the shot of this guy talking to someone on the other side of the table. So this is the first shot, where the answer shot or the reverse shot of that would be the other guy. Whoever, or the same, maybe it's a lady. So you have another lady he's talking to on the other side of the table as a separate shot. He's on the right-hand side of the frame looking left. Maybe the shot that's showing her talking would have her on the left side of the frame looking right. You can kind of imagine in a separate shot, if he's on the right-hand side of the frame looking left and she's on the left-hand side of the frame looking right, when I cut those two shots together, they're on opposite sides of the frame and their eye lines, or the directions that they're looking at, are opposite as well. So when I cut back and forth, it looks like they are looking at each other. And we'll show examples of that a little later on. But I just want to give you a reason as to why you want to be able to rapidly recall a source clip that you had recently used in the source monitor, so you don't have to go fishing through the source clips in the project panel. So you have hundreds of them. You know that you just recently used a clip, you want to use it again. You don't have to go fishing through the project panel looking for it. If you used it recently, you can just pull it from the last section here, the third section at the bottom of the source panel menu. I'll pull up a few other double click. Remember, that's one way we can load a clip into the project panels, by double clicking make this a little bit bigger. You can double click. I'm going to make this window bigger by hovering over the top edge of the lower left panel, or the lower left frame. I'm sorry, hovering over the top left of the lower left frame. Look for the double arrows that are up and down. When I see that, when I click and drag up, it'll make the project panel and everything on that same level bigger, and everything that's on a level above it smaller to accommodate for space. So once again, I can load the clip into the project panel. I can load a clip from the project panel into the source clip by double clicking it. Another way I can load a clip into the source panel from the project panel is by directly dragging it. I can click and drag a clip. You see the closed fist? I release the mouse and it loads it up in the source monitor. Another way that I can load a clip into the source panel. Now I'm reloading some clips that have already been in the source panel because I don't really have a whole lot in the project panel. But if I control click the clip, and then with the shortcut menu that appears, this is called a shortcut menu, is a menu that appears when I control click or right click a clip. Okay, anytime, or when I control click or right click even a window sometimes. Anytime I control click or right click something and it gives me a menu, that's called a shortcut menu. Sometimes we call it a contextual menu, because it depends on what you right click. That's what's going to determine the menu that it shows you. So I can control click a source clip, and then I can choose open in source monitor. Bam, that's another way that I can open a clip in the source monitor. Okay, so those are the three main ways we have opening clips in the source monitors. Make sure you know that, and we'll move on from there. Say, for example, I have this long list, okay, of clips. Say, for example, this clip right here in my recent clips, menu. Say I want to exclude that or take that out of the recent clips menu. I can first load it up like I just did, and then choose close, just the single close, not close all, but just close. Bam. And what it does is that it eliminates that one clip, which was 0020, I believe, it eliminates that from the list of recent clips. That's like, okay, oops, I accidentally, let's choose another one, do it again. 15B, let's say you accidentally included this in the source monitor and you're not going to use it in the recent clips. I want to get rid of it just so I can quickly flip through the clips I want. I can choose it, then choose close, and it'll clear that clip out of my recent clips menu. Okay, if I choose close all, what it's going to do is it's going to clear the entire recent clips menu, and it's going to, of course, wipe anything out of the source clip that's loaded. So it's like starting from scratch. Of course, if I want to load, I can just drag a clip to the source monitor and I start all over again. So that's the recent clips menu. Of course, we have other tabs or other panels inside of the upper left frame. We'll talk about those a little later on, but that is all that I want to talk about. One other thing I want to talk about with the source panel is there's a zoom slider. And as you can see, I can drag it. It's like a slider. I'll just make it smaller. It's like a little slider at the bottom of the source panel timeline ruler. And if I click in the center of it and drag left and right, I'm scrolling up and down the timeline. Now, the reason why I can't see both the in point and out point at the same time anymore is because of the fact that I drag, this is what I had originally, where the slider is the entire length of the timeline ruler. And so basically what that means is I'm seeing all of the footage in the timeline ruler. But say you want to focus on a small portion, you want to zoom in on a small portion, I can click and drag either the left end or the right end of the timeline zoom slider, the zoom slider, and I can drag inwards, drag towards the center of the zoom slider to zoom in. So drag in to zoom in, and as you can see, these little tick marks right here, they're kind of like time measurements because of the fact that each frame is indicated by each one of these tick marks. I know they're not numbered, but I'll show you how to do that. And I can get closer and closer if I need to do a precision edit. I see my playhead here. This duration, this little blue horizontal line, that represents the duration of one frame, one still image, one frame. That's one frame in this video, okay? I'm zoomed in as far as I can in the source monitor timeline ruler. And say, for example, I want to see the end of the timeline ruler. I can grab the zoom slider and drag it from the center. Make sure you drag it from the center so you don't zoom back out, and drag it down the timeline. I can drag to the out point like that. So the left end and the right end, drag in to zoom in, drag out to zoom out of the timeline ruler. I can drag by the center of the timeline ruler to scroll up and down the timeline in the source panel. Okay, one last thing I want to show you is this button right here. This is the button editor. You see I have certain buttons like the marker button, add marker, mark in, mark out, go to in point, step back one frame, play, step forward one frame, go to out point, insert edit, overwrite edit, export. These are not all the buttons you can have here, okay? You can add buttons to this list by, well, actually this area that it is, this area is called a button bar. The button bar, the source monitor has one, and we're going to see later on the program monitor has one, its own one as well. That's very similar. But if I want to add more buttons, I'm going to click the button editor. That's the plus button. And then, for example, I can add play video in to out, okay? Or let's see, one useful one to add to your button bar is the loop playback. If you look at the blue highlighted area, that's showing you basically where I can add buttons. I'm going to drag the loop playback down to the button bar and let go. And see, now I've added the loop playback. I'm going to press OK. Now watch what's going to happen. I'm going to press the loop playback button. It's blue, so it's active. I'm going to hit the space bar, which is another way to play, and it's going to loop the playback. It's going to play it from beginning to end and then start all over again. Let me zoom out. You're going to see the playhead's going to go to the end, and then it's going to start all over again. That's loop playback. See that? Loop playback. Okay? So the button bar and the button editor with the icons there, it's also very useful. Other very useful icons there like adding closed captions, Using your safe margins, that's one that's useful down here as well. Okay, jump to marker or go to next marker, that's useful as well. Okay, if you want to reset your layout to what it was originally when the program shipped and you want to get rid of all the additions you made, just click reset layout and hit OK. So that is the source monitor, and it is a very, very useful monitor that you will use a lot. A lot of times people use a source monitor after they've imported clips into the project panel. Then one by one, they'll click them and watch the clips one by one, and they'll add markers to them. Like say, for example, if I want to say, see I had the camera shake here. I want to show you another feature while I'm here. I have a little bit of a camera shake, if you can see it right in here. Okay, and say I want to put a note there saying, hey, you know, don't use this part of this clip because somebody hit the camera. You can hear a little pop sound. That's probably somebody bumping up against the camera, and you see the shake. See that? So say you want to indicate, hey, don't use this portion here. What I can do is I can place my playhead where I see the camera shake. I can hit the marker button or use the keyboard shortcut M. I could also go to the markers menu and go to add marker, okay? And it adds a marker there. This doesn't edit it or add anything to the image. It doesn't change the image at all. All it does is add a little, kind of like a bookmark, okay? A marker, M-A-R-K-E-R. That's different from a mark. A marker is just a little bookmark that kind of reminds you of something. I can see the marker here at the top of the timeline, mini timeline in the source monitor. I know my playhead is on the exact frame that holds the marker when I get this little marker icon right here next to the drag video only icon. This marker here tells me my playhead is directly aligned with the marker. Okay, now say I want to add I can add a comment to it or change the color. I'm going to double click on the marker in the timeline area, and I want to say, let's call this camera shake. I'm just going to call it camera shake. And if I want to, I can put a comment. Someone bumped the camera and the image shakes. Do not use this portion of the clip. Okay, and I can say, man, I want to make it red. I want to color code and say all my errors, everything that's wrong with the image, I'm going to color code with red markers. I'm going to use red. You can see there are different kinds of markers. There's chapter marker, segmentation marker, web length, flash coupon. We'll talk about those later. And also a marker can either be 1 frame long or can have a duration. If it has a duration of 000, that means it's 1 frame long. I'm going to click OK, and you see that's my marker right there. Okay. I can double click on it again, and you can see it'll recall what I just showed you. Speaking of duration, one last thing, I keep saying that, is say, for example, I want this marker to be, I don't know, say I want it to be 5 frames long. Okay, I can type a 5, just a 5 for 5 frames in the duration field. Let's make it longer so it'd be easier to see. Let's say make it 1 second long, 1 second and then 0 frames. Don't forget your frames when you start counting out time code. Click OK, and look, that marker has been split and it has a duration. Okay, if I hover over it, it'll kind of tell me what it's all about. It'll tell me the title, camera shake. It'll tell me where it starts at 6 hours, 59 seconds, 6 hours, 59 minutes, 35 seconds, and 27 frames on the master time code. That's this time code right here. That's the time code relative within this clip that the camera shot. And its duration is 1 second long. Okay, and it also shows me my notes. All right, and if I zoom in by pressing the plus button a couple of times on the keyboard, pressing the plus button on the keyboard is another way to zoom in into the active window. It'll show me the whole message there. Okay, so I kind of showed you a little bit about markers. Told you a little about, by the way, the difference between a marker and a mark is a marker doesn't change the image at all. It's like a reminder for you. You can type in notes, whereas a mark is an endpoint or an out point. Okay, a mark is an endpoint or an out point. A marker is something else entirely different. It is like a little bookmark that allows you to not save, but to delineate a particular frame or duration within a clip. The funny part about it is that all of those commands setting a marker can be, of course, found in the markers menu, but also setting a mark, which is an endpoint and out point, that also can be set from the markers menu. All right, so that's all I have for the source monitor. Next, we're going to talk about the timeline panel.